Today's discussion is going to be about how do you stand out and attract top talent in a candidate market. This is a LeadDev webinar created in partnership with SHL. The webinar will last roughly 45 minutes, after which both myself and the panelists will head over to the LeadDev Slack to answer some of your questions in the hiring channel. We may also have time to answer a couple of questions live, so please do submit those through the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we'll get to them toward the end. All right, let's get started with some introductions. My name is Dahlia Havens, and I'm really excited to be joined today with Sarah, Arsene, and Mark. I will turn it over to each of you to introduce yourself and would really love to hear why this was an exciting conversation for you to join and be a part of. Sarah, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, it's so good to be here. I'm Sarah Milstein. I'm the VP of Engineering at Daily. We are a video platform with about 75 employees right now. And I was particularly excited to join this conversation because I, in my career, have worked only at places that could not pay at the very top end of the range. So I've really had to think about and try lots of other things to attract candidates. And it turns out I mostly like working with people who value things other than money or additionally. And so I like the process of figuring out, and then I like the results as well.
Very cool. Arsene, would you like to share some thoughts as well?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Arsene Tumani. I'm Director of Engineering at Lead. We are a platform that helps healthcare companies build consumer experiences. And we're a team of about 700 people. About half of that is engineering. And I've been here for about a year now, and I've been responsible for working closely with the talent team to really scale up our engineering team. And it's doubled in size since I joined. And I'm really excited to be here to share my learnings, but also get to hear how other teams are able to keep a consistent, inclusive, and fair hiring process, because that matters a lot for us here at Lead.
Thank you. Mark, last but not least, would love if you could introduce yourself and share a bit of thoughts.
Thanks, Dalia. Hi, I'm Mark Brinkat. I'm CTO at SHL. What SHL does is we deliver people insights through people science. So we spend our day thinking around those products and those experiences we can put into the market to help companies all over the world recruit and also engage talent through that talent acquisition process. So I'm really delighted to be part of this panel and to be able to share thoughts around this whole experience. I also have a team of engineers which work on this product development, which is distributed. So I also face the challenges around recruiting and attracting talent into our organization.
Thank you all. I am really excited to learn from each of you. In a competitive market, as I'm sure you all know, it's imperative that your sourcing, hiring, interviews, and offer process is well put together in order to yield the best results for you and your team. Today, we will focus our conversation on how to attract the best candidates for your team, how to keep them engaged and excited through the interview process, and how to best differentiate your team and offer from other companies. Sometimes we think about these differentiators only at the offer stage, but from my experience, creating that differentiator starts from the first engagement with a candidate, or sometimes even before, if they do research on your company or your product, or maybe have a common connection with one of your team members. So maybe we will start the conversation today with a little bit of behind the scenes. Before you set up your interview process and think about how to attract these amazing candidates to your team, I'd love if each of you would share some thoughts on how do you get together with your team to outline what would you like to see in the role, whether that be skills, communication, leadership, and maybe other elements that you consider as part of putting together that candidate profile. Sarah, would you like to start?
Sure. So for us at Daily, we have a paid take home for every role. And that we put a lot of thought into that because it's the most important signal for us. It's usually a go or no go signal. And so when we do that, the take home itself has a lot of thought behind it, and how we introduce it to candidates is important as well. But then we also, depending on the role, will invest some time in writing up notes and talking with each other about what we're looking for in the take home, in the conversations afterward with the candidate. And if somebody passes the take home, there are further conversations. Most often, they're conversations where we're trying to sell the candidate. We're there to answer their questions, to help them understand what it's like at Daily. But we may have additional segments that are focused on, depending on the role, on other parts of the work or other cultural factors. And then typically, if I'm the hiring manager, I will write out some notes about that. We'll have some questions that I'm going to ask different panelists to ask at different stages so that all the candidates get the same questions. And some rubrics of what I'm looking for as a strong answer or a weak answer, and a rubric on what I would consider a strong or a weak, like go or no go from a panelist. And then we meet and talk over the notes and make sure everybody has some sense of what their role is and what the goals are and how we're going to reach them.
That's really great. Being able to outline to the team what signals you're looking for throughout the interview process can be tremendously helpful in finding that great candidate. Curious, Arsene, would you like to add anything?
Yes, of course. So we do something a bit similar to that, in which we focus really on the skill matrix that we have to really identify what are the specific skill sets that this role need to have in order to be successful. And based on that, we turn that into a scorecard. So we align that with a scorecard and make sure that interviewers really focus on those attributes to make sure that we remove any bias in the process and really focus on the core skills. So that's essentially what we do to identify that. What we also make sure is that we focus on talent instead of skills, because we know that as the company scales and the company changes, skills are going to also evolve. And a good example of that is that a lot of our backend engineers that we've hired at League had no prior experience with Golang, which is a language that we use, and they had to come and learn how to use it on the job. So that's what we do. Yeah, that's what I have to add.
That's really fantastic. And you mentioned in your intro also really being mindful of making sure that it is an inclusive and fair process. Is there anything you'd like to share on this specifically?
Yes, absolutely. So one thing that's important is trying to identify what the ideal candidate at each experience level is, right? To make sure that every interviewer already has an idea of what sort of answers to look for, right? And to remove this personal bias that we all may have, right? So that provides guidance and also a certain level of standardization into the process. So that has been helpful. Something else that's been helpful has been really making sure that all candidates receive a similar set of questions in order to, because it's good to have interviews be free flowing and be natural, but we also want to make sure that we keep the process fair for everyone, and we don't ask more difficult questions to certain candidates and less difficult to others. So those are the ways we've made sure to keep our interview process fair.
Great, thank you. Mark, would you like to add any thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting to hear some of these thoughts. We internally we use a lot of what we actually offer in the market through our platforms. So when we're looking at kind of defining a role, besides the skills, we also look at those competencies that are really, really important for us at the various stages, and in terms of the role. Then we look at through testing those really to get insights. The removing the bias for us is actually being able to take people through a consistent process. And we've been doing quite a lot of work into this around the experience, around the attraction. Actually, really interesting around. We have a video interviewing product also, and we were able to do. We did a study a bit on the interviews we performed. We were using our video interviewing solution, and those insights were really interesting. For example, looking at the number of people that actually had their camera off when they were interviewing somebody, and or looking at the type of questions that people were asking in the interview and how much were you explaining about the role towards allowing the candidates to actually answer the question. And I think all that insight actually feeds into the development and the improvement of the actual interview cycle, which is pretty much a black box type of thing. Yeah, you're having an interaction with somebody over a virtual setting or a one-to-one. That insight is really important to help you continuously improve that hiring process that you have.
That's really interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So this is a great segue to talk about what most folks attending probably our talk today are very interested in. How do you attract those really amazing candidates for your role, for your company? So I'm curious if you, again, like similarly, do you have a framework? How do you work behind the scenes to start to bring those signals to the candidates that your company has what they might be looking for, and you start to lay out some of these differentiators? So I'm gonna just pause for a minute and put a plug to Sarah. Sarah wrote a blog post, and it's a LeadDev article, and I really, really enjoyed reading through it. So definitely would love if you would share some of those thoughts. But like, I think, again, going back to what I said earlier when we started, it's often missed that the company or what we put out into the world as far as like articles or how your engineering team might be interacting with an open source project, these are all really great ways to start to reach out to candidates who do not necessarily know much about your company and give them an idea of what your company and team is like. But before we continue this, I'd love to see if anyone would like to start this question.
Sure,
right.
I can take. Sure, I can take this. So I think what you pointed out about sharing the type of challenges that your company is working on is very important, and I totally agree with that. I think that a big part of it is transparency and sort of building that trust with the candidate right before they start the process. And I think the more they know about your company, the more likely they are to trust your process and stick through interview stages. So doing things like sharing some engineering challenges that your team has been working on, making sure that you do have a good online presence on social media, on Glassdoor is a big one, right? Because people really want to know from people who have worked at the company what it's really like working at your company. So I think that those are good practices to attracting engineers.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Arsen said, and I'll add a few things. Um, so one thing to note is that almost always one of the first things people see is the job description. So that the listing should be really good. It should be thoughtful. It should, I mean, I'm saying using the word should, but my experience has been that we're most successful when the job listings are very descriptive about a number of things that the candidates are likely to care about. So that includes details of the job and the kinds of technical challenges, the cool technical challenges that we face, some things that talk about our culture, but the job description should also reflect the culture so they can see that. Being transparent about our comp structure and strategy, talking about how we work, and giving details, to Arsen's point, giving details about the interview itself so people know what to expect if they wind up going through the steps. What's it going to look like? It's fascinating to me that almost every candidate that I talk to mentions that we have that information in our job listings. So in some ways, we think about the job listing as describing like what you'll do and what characteristics or experience you need to have. And I think that stuff is maybe 50% of what's important. There's a lot of other pieces that people really value in that JD. And it can link as well. Again, as Arsen said, you've got an online presence. The JD can link to lots of things that give people ways to learn more.
Absolutely.
I think that's really interesting. It's definitely agree with all those points. I think some of the things we've been trying out is being much more open around sharing more, like on social media channels, what we're doing, what's some of the community work that we do also, and try and bring that culture out. I think some other things we're doing with some of our clients, specifically around presence, is actually hearing from the people that you are going to be working with, not just hearing from maybe the CEO or the CTO of an organization, but hearing what is it like, as a principal engineer or as an associate or entry level, what is it like working in this company. And some of these, the more you share, is you're opening up a bit what it's like to work with the organization. And we've been doing this with some of our clients in terms of their presence, and through using some of the products that we developed to actually do this. But also internally, we've been looking at creating our own presence, kind of our own videos that then we can start sharing to the wider community.
Great.
Yeah.
And oh, sorry, Arsen, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit to this, to the points that everyone else shared, but I wanted to share a bit about how some of the things that I've really found fascinating with how we've been able to do that here at League, on top of what I've shared, which is we really try to not focus on traditional ways of attracting candidates, because we've found that that has been the best way for us to bring in non-traditional engineers and employees to the team, right? So good examples of that are like our coding test, right? We make sure that our coding test is not one that is just the typical like algorithm, computer science type challenges, right? We make sure that these are actual challenges that people are going to be doing on the job, right? And we see that candidates really appreciate that, because they know that they don't have to go back and study the material that they studied back in school, right? And that's really how you're able to attract those candidates that don't always make it through the process. And that's how we've also been able to bring in a very diverse number of engineers on our team. And that's been very effective for us. So I wanted to point that out as well. that's a good way to attract talent. Yeah.
That's really, really great. I wanted to ask each of you if you wouldn't mind sharing about for the developers or for the engineers that you're looking to hire, have you been more successful hiring more junior developers, more senior developers? I think it also depends on the needs of the teams at times, but curious if anyone here would like to share some thoughts on the level of experience that you look for and what are some of the ways that you take those individuals through maybe some of that assessment.
I can take that from firstly. From a personal perspective, we've seen a really good uptake of our entry level program, especially with the interaction we're doing with a few universities, specifically campus hires going there, presenting what we're doing, what's coming out of our innovation labs, and actually, that was quite successful also to create that pathway, kind of. We had some challenges around experience level, the getting the experienced hires. I think we faced some challenges over that through last year, especially. And that actually triggered us to double down on that entry level program. Obviously, you can't have a full team full of entry level. You need to have a good balance across the team. But definitely, I had a positive experience of actually through that program.
Thank you, Mark. That's great.
We're a little bit at the other end of the spectrum in that Daly's is about 75 people, about half engineering. And we hire almost exclusively people who are pretty senior, mostly pretty late career, some mid-career. But we have we're only about 5 years old. We're like a Series B company, and we're still really building the product and finding our regular repeatable customers. And part of what we wanted to focus on was being able to build the product. And when you have a bigger range of career stages, and particularly people who are earlier in their careers, you need to do a lot more company building to be able to support them. And we're just not there yet. We are still the thing that we are building, the real-time video and audio APIs for any developer to use. That stuff is technically very hard and takes years. And so we're really focused on that, getting to a level where we can then invest in the company building in a deeper way and have the support available for more junior engineers, more people who are earlier in their careers across the board. So we've been pretty intentional in only looking for more senior people. And in some ways that's useful because we can be a little more narrow in what we say we're looking for and how we find and assess candidates.
Makes sense.
So at League, we've been doing a bit similar to what Mark shared, which is going with a mix of junior and senior, and that has been very intentional, specifically because it's really nice to make sure that every team has a good balance between junior and senior, specifically not just to create and cultivate and promote that growth internally and have that knowledge stick around as people move up the career ladder, but also to provide some of our senior engineers with mentorship opportunities to really work with more junior staff and help them develop their skills. So that's what we've been doing. I will, however, say that there are some junior engineers that may sometimes have just as much output as those who are more senior. And I think that that could be a great route for some smaller companies who may not be able to compete with more senior with larger companies to attract more senior devs. So one thing I've always told some of the people that I know who have more smaller companies is to not overlook those educational institutions and those partnerships with schools and colleges, and really try to leverage some of the talent that's in there.
Thank you. I'd like to remind everyone joining us, there's a Q&A button in Zoom. We'd love to get your questions. I have a good set here to continue for the conversation, but if there's something from what we're talking about that you'd like to ask, please don't hesitate to pop into the Q&A and I'll try to keep an eye on it. Continuing on, one of the things that we said also in our conversation was sort of what candidates may care about beyond just the compensation or sometimes the things that are very typical in an offer. I'm curious your thoughts on what else have you seen be a good factor for you to differentiate your company, your role, your team for the candidates that you want to hire. Arsene, would you like to start this time?
Sure thing. I think it's important as a company to distinguish between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation when you're looking to put together an attractive package for employees and people who you're looking to attract. And one of the ways that we've done that is by making sure that the stuff that's more intrinsic, which are things like providing great career development opportunities, right? Providing a safe environment for people to work in, and also making sure that it's diverse enough that people from any background feel comfortable working in, and also showcasing and highlighting that through means like your social media or your website or reviews on Glassdoor. I think those have been ways that we've been able to attract people without solely focusing on things like salary and benefits and such.
I think that's really interesting, actually. I'm trying to think about like I totally agree with what Arsene is saying. It's sort of looking at what the company can offer from a career development and pathway, and learning opportunities towards then professionally how you can grow. Yeah. Also, I think other than that, maybe thinking a bit around through it's around through that engagement piece when you are actually trying to attract candidates, yeah, through the process. One of the things we taught around in one of our products, the experience, is really looking at that experience as a science, and actually really looking at how that flow works, and actually adopting things like maybe experimenting with different type of experiences there that will actually help attract more people. Sort of it's using that data to actually inform your talent acquisition pipeline also. It's something obviously you have to have the career pathway, you have to have the right presence, you have to have that you're sending out the right messages. But then once you have that, is really optimizing that flow, because ultimately that's the first real interaction with your company. Yeah, that the candidate or the talent you're trying to attract is going to have, and that's really important, because your first impression into there.
there's a question from the Q&A, and maybe Sarah, this is probably more for you. Again, when you think of beyond the compensation, I'm reframing the question a little bit, but what are some of the things that you think about, especially for senior engineers, and since you're focused on hiring in that level?
So a lot of this reflects what Mark and Arsen have said, but I would say the top two things that lately people say they care about most are company culture and work flexibility. People want to know that they can set their own hours. They want to know that if they can work 4-day weeks, if they can take significant vacation time to take care of their families, all of that. So part of what we talk about is how we set those things up. That's critical. The cultural piece, I think culture means a lot of things to people, and people are looking for different things in culture. But I saw that one of the questions is, did I say actually that our take home is a paid take home? And yes, it is. And that's partly a reflection of our culture, that we value people's time, and paying for your time and doing the take home is a signal in itself to candidates. So those are two top things, but I will say as well for more experienced candidates in this market, people want to know that you're good at remote work, because it used to be a differentiator if you were a fully remote company, but it is no longer a differentiator. Everybody is now. But being good at it and having a pretty deep understanding of how your company does it well, being able to talk about that's important. People often care, I think as both Arsen and Mark have said, about opportunities to grow in their careers. And that's true even for very senior engineers, that people's interest in growth doesn't stop. But I think as well, being able to help people understand what kind of responsibility and autonomy they might have. Those things are, I think, more and more important as people get more senior in their careers. And I don't mean autonomy that you would be isolated. We expect people, and you have to be very collaborative, I think, in any engineering organization. But we can help define what that means in our organization. And we can do that in part because one other thing that we have are very experienced founders, and senior people often care about that quite a bit. So our whole exec team is actually quite experienced, but our founders have been around a couple of blocks before.
Really great insight. Thank you for sharing. Continuing on the conversation, we touched briefly on sort of the remote aspect of a company is in ways a differentiator, but doing it well is right now what really matters. Sarah, thank you for speaking on that. I'm curious, your thoughts, Arsen. I think your team is also distributed. Would you like to add anything?
Yes, absolutely. I think that it's very important at the core so before I get to remote, it's very important at the core for your company to have a solid mission, right? A mission that is very easy for people to want to rally around. And I think that speaks a lot to what your company culture is going to be like. And for example, I found that our mission of helping people live happier and healthier lives has really resonated with a lot of candidates as we interview them. They seem excited. And I think that can really be a big differentiation factor, right? And now speaking about remote, yes, absolutely. Remote work is no longer a big special benefit that you can offer candidates, right? Like most companies that are competitive do offer it. So you need to be remote first. You need to be able to have really policies and processes in place that don't treat people who are in person or local as first-class citizens. So that translates into like when you're having bonding events and activities, right? Like you make sure that you include people who are attending remotely or people who may not be able to be there in person. When you're having meetings where decisions are being made, you make sure that you record the meetings and you take notes and you share them with the people who are not able to attend, right? And I think that doing those things really do show that you're more inclusive team, and you also need to be able to communicate that to candidates on your job description and during the interview process so that they feel comfortable with coming in as a remote employee.
Great. Mark, there's a question that came through the Q&A that I wonder if you'd like to share some insight on it. But in your practice, and especially since you're working a lot with hiring data and improving sort of from that insight, the question again, I will reframe a little bit, but how do you measure the improvement of attracting candidates, or what are some of the KPIs or some of the metrics that you've sort of been successful with as part of measuring that continuous improvement?
I know, of course. I think there are a number of things we look at. Yeah, for example, we look at dropout rates. Yeah, where in the experience you are actually dropping off, and then try to understand also why there was that dropout. Yeah, trying to look at the data around that. We look at that funnel. We look at the recruitment process like any sort of acquisition funnel that you're coming through, and at which stage you have the most conversion. Yeah, so definitely dropout rates we look at. We look at also time to complete. Yeah, what time? It's the engagement time needed across the experience. Yeah, it's another important factor. We would look at also time spent. So, for example, one of the features we offer, for example, is be able to build an experience, and in that experience, you are putting in informational videos, about your company, or hear from the CEO, or hear from this person, and hear from this team what's about. So, really looking at how people are interacting with that the same exact way you would when you are looking at content publishing. Yeah, when you're looking at the hot zones on your and how you are going to be driving that click-through rate. And that's some of the things that we've been looking at introducing much more into the way we build those experiences. Hopefully I answered your question.
That's really interesting. Great. Well, we are probably at our final question. I'd like to wrap it up with a conversation that I hear a lot in these hiring topics, which is around compensation. I am curious if each of you would share some of your thoughts on the compensation. How far do you negotiate on salary? What other factors do you consider when you get to that offer stage? So you can hopefully get to a place where both sides are excited and able to sort of like align and accept the offer. Anyone want to jump in?
Sure, I can take this
Sarah?
one.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Arsene. Great.
All good. Yeah, so we use our salary bands, our pay bands, to really help both the hiring manager and the talent team to understand how much we are offering for each level. And we try to make sure that the candidate going through the interview process, the experience that they have matches with one of those levels in the pay band, and we try to be we try to align to that as much as possible without leaving too much room for negotiation. And the reason for that is because we try to not have a situation where the people who are great negotiators end up getting a better offer than people who can negotiate, right? So that's why we're usually not too flexible on the negotiation part. But one thing that we do when we are at when we meet a candidate that is really pushing for a better salary, we do let the candidate know that this is something that can be reevaluated after their probation or after 6 months of performance. It's something that we can reevaluate, because if you do work as someone who was a senior 2 engineer, for example, but you came in as a senior 1, there's no reason to why you shouldn't get paid as such if that is your contribution. So
So we have a quite different way of approaching this, which is also, I will say, partly a reflection. A lot of the differences between what I've talked about and I think Arsene and Mark are talking about is we're still much smaller companies. So there's different things that are appropriate and that we can do, and different things you can do when you're bigger. But we have our compensation is all based on, for employees and candidates, on the years of relevant experience that somebody has for a role. We don't have job titles. We don't really have levels, and there's levels for each band. We never refer to them internally. We use the same criteria for leveling people internally that we do for candidates. We talk about it in the job descriptions, and we have some pretty long blog posts about it as well. And so people know when they're talking to us, they have a sense of what the salary is likely to be for them. And then we don't negotiate at all. And we also don't offer what Arsene just talked about, which makes lots of sense in many contexts. We don't do that because the way you get a raise and a level bump is by getting more experience at Daily. You just stay for a couple of years and you get to the next level. So we don't have any promotion process. That's all very clear in all of our job info. So part of, when we think of, we're talking earlier about having your job descriptions reflect your culture, our approach to comp is part of what reflects our culture. And so we're talking about that everywhere. And for lots of people, it's great. It attracts them. They're thrilled. And for some people, it's not a fit. We're not going to pay enough, or they want to be able to get promoted in a certain way. And that's okay if it's filtering out for some of those folks. We know we can't attract everybody, and sometimes we will lose some people and it will be hard, but we're okay with that. It's a reasonable trade-off for us.
I think that's really interesting. Also, I think different markets, different trigger points. Yeah, it's like, for example, I do a lot of recruiting in India, for example, because I have quite a significant portion of the team there, and their salaries and pay packages have suddenly, over the last year and a half, they've went sky high. Yeah, and it's really hard to pay. It's really hard to keep up. There is a lot of investment, a lot of early startups coming into that region, and they are pushing the money up. From what we look at is we look at the total offer, not just compensation. We look at what's else in there in terms of benefits you get, in terms of long-term type of incentives, to sort of look to have you there and keep you there for a while. Is it successful or not? Time will tell. I think at this point in time, it's sort of it's challenging in that region. UK, US, probably we're seeing some of the same challenges, not necessarily from a compensation perspective, but in relation to people shopping around, having the ability to go and have, I can go for this role, that role. It's slightly different from what was the situation a few years back. So definitely there has been a shift there.
Thank you. It is our time to wrap up. This was a great conversation. Thank you all for really sharing your insight and, allowing me to ask a lot of different questions. Thanks to everyone who've contributed questions to the Q&A. They will move over to Slack. We will wrap up today. Again, really appreciate everyone's time and the effort and insights that you've provided. We'll see you on Slack. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.